I don't know.
Don't you want to like ask people what they believe and why they're there? What were there any government officials handing out surveys when at least to the people that weren't breaking the law, and asking them why they're there? I don't know. So I sometimes wonder if any of these people have ever taken a little bit of time to to engage in conversations with actual human beings and not just sit in front of a mirror and talk pretty to themselves.
No, I think it's just that there's a political agenda, and the left in the United States is not against prosecuting their political opponents.
Well,
just for the purpose of keeping them from trying to rise up again in opposition the next time.
Well, I think I don't think they would.
Right as either.
Yeah, I would say I don't think they're. I think most people on the left just want the law upheld, and I would say there is some level. I would say there is some level of irrationality with regards to being afraid that there's this big white supremacist ghost out there that's haunting everyone and everything. I don't see any evidence of that, but I do. But I think the majorities on either side want law-abiding citizens walking around. And,
law and order. Law and order. Most people do.
Yeah, and I understand. I understand the hyperbole behind what you're saying. You get pissed off and frustrated when you see people. I would look out, and if I see my tax dollars being wasted on programs that are ghost hunting, essentially, I would be pissed about that.
Well, or witch hunting.
Well, that's what I mean.
And
Same thing.
And you're one of the hypothetical witches.
Ghost hunting is worse though, because you're going to be hard pressed to find someone who believes in a fucking witch, but it seems like half the people I talk to believe ghosts actually exist.
Okay.
Oh man, you gotta come to California. Half the women here are witches.
Yeah, they're real. No, they're real witches.
They're herbalists.
Here's another interesting caveat to that, though. With ghosts, there's like no actual person you can say that person's a ghost.
Right.
With a witch, you can't actually accuse people of being a witch.
I guess you could point to, but here's the worst part of this, Scott, is that you can point to the air and say, "It's telling me your son is safe on the other side."
Oh, exactly. Yeah. Dude, who was that guy? John Edwards. Oh man, that guy was just the absolute worst. You know what I'm talking about? That guy, John Edwards. It was back in late 90s, 2000s, where he had the TV show where he was the medium, and he'd have like an audience of people, and he'd be like, I'm getting a name. It starts with an M. Is it Mike? And he just starts going through it until he finds
until somebody's like, yeah, that's me.
Yeah,
exactly.
He goes through the whole fucking phone book. Someone, oh yeah, that's my full name.
Yep. That guy was terrible.
Yeah. Well, what are some of the other conversations that have been happening on the Discord? I was gone for the weekend, so.
What is the topic today? Is it Nazis again?
No, it's just test your skepticism. I hadn't checked.
Oh, okay.
It's just casual chats today.
Okay. I don't know if we were following up on that.
I mean, we can go.
Started.
Yeah, I mean, we can go there. Definitely, we could go to part 2 of that if we want.
I just say that because when I saw, like, when I first popped in, it popped up on YouTube and it said it was part 2 of that today. Maybe that's what you said. You changed the name. Yeah, it was we already did the part 2 over on this side, so it was just left over from last time. But gotcha. We can definitely dive into that if we feel like it. How's your trip,
Before
Scott?
we get there,
Yeah, go ahead.
Good, man. Got some fresh trout, cooked it up with some herbs, and then had some lemons, wrapped it in bacon, wrapped that bad boy in foil, just threw them in the fire for a bit. Oh, goodness.
Dude, that sounds...
It was so good.
Sounds glorious.
Yeah, it's one of those things because I was pretty much up there for a week, and I was supposed to go back to work yesterday, and I get back Sunday night, and I'm like, no, that's not happening. I'm extending my vacation one more day.
Yeah. Nice. What do you got there, Dal? You were saying something?
On my Discord, I asked a question, and it got more traction than I thought it would, so I thought I'd bring it here. How many holes are in a straw?
How many holes are in a straw?
Yeah.
There's one hole in a straw.
No, there's 0 holes in a straw.
Well, okay. Let's all try to agree on definition of a fucking hole. Something I can stick my penis in.
Yeah, so I know where Dal's going. So imagine if you have a penny and you punched a hole through it, there would be one hole in that penny, right? Regardless of the width of the material around that hole or the depth of that material, there would still just be one hole going through whatever material. So even with the straw, even though it's really long and the walls of the outside are still thin, to me it seems like it's still just one hole, right? Like a vagina is still just one hole, right?
Vagina is not a hole.
So
according to
so the vaginal canal is
it's a cavity.
That's right. Yeah, it doesn't go all the way through the object.
I'm inside your cavity.
Oh yeah, you're right. Straws have one hole.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, you can argue 0, but it takes you have to argue if you roll up a piece of paper, that you didn't actually make a hole in it. You just put 2 ends together, and that's the same sort of thing. But,
okay.
And then 2 holes.
Yeah, straws are extruded, so.
Yeah, I don't know how they're made. I guess that would be the real answer.
Most straws, the plastic ones are mostly extruded. Paper ones are rolled up. But no, there's a whole study of the morphology of holes and like how many holes is in the human body, and really you just have one hole that goes through.
Yeah, right. Because
your whole body.
If a vagina is not a hole, are ears holes?
Yeah, ears
they're orifices.
Like your sinuses from your ears go to your mouth, so it actually does go all the way through, but it's the same hole as your. But it's in the same. It's actually. Yeah, I don't know. The way that you count it is not the same. I forget the whole
really
thing.
Yeah, a pee hole would not really be a hole then.
Yeah, I guess it would have to depend on what scale you're looking at, because
depends on how much syphilis you've had.
How many holes are in a bag of marbles?
How many holes in a Deepak Chopra argument?
The quantum nature of reality suggests. I don't know.
You will not understand the quantum if you don't understand the quantum.
Man, that dude fucking bothers me so much. I'm surprised you guys have the wherewithal to actually sit there and listen through anything he says.
He's like a hardcore idealist. He's like, the world is all inside your head is kind of what I get from him. Like it's all mind.
You are the world. Yeah. We didn't do a final tally vote to see where everyone thinks the Nazis land. On the left or the right, based on our little list that we made.
So it's going to be hard because people didn't agree on the properties of the left, and people also didn't agree on the properties of Nazis.
Oh, we did. We got those I think it was 3 points.
We got 3 points of what does it mean to be on the left, but the people who were in the conversation eliminated the notion of a what do you call it? Economic left.
Well, let me ask.
And they limited it to only egalitarian idealism.
Right. Scott, let me ask you this: do you think generally the Democrats, like the Blue Party in the United States, is trying to appeal more to the left side of the political spectrum than the right side of the political spectrum?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely trying to appeal more to the left side of the spectrum.
So Don and others in the room would not acknowledge that. Like they were saying no.
That's weird.
Yeah, and this is this is where it was damn near impossible to get anyone to just say, okay, generally Donald Trump and the Republican Party, when Donald Trump was in power, was trying to appeal to the generally trying to, obviously they want to bring new people in, but they're generally building a platform to appeal to a right-leaning constituency. And Joe Biden is, but they were saying, no, that has nothing to do with it. And I'm like, what are you talking about, man? Like, I'm just speaking in general terms here. I'm not saying that Joe Biden is a leftist and he stands for everything that is leftism. It's like, I'm not saying that. I'm just like, fucking, when people clam up so much, and I think there's a lot of, and the reason why I wanted to go through the torturous project of making this list of agreed upon, statements or claims or goals of the left and the right is because I'm not sure each individual person knows exactly what they mean by left or right, and they throw around that term all the time. Yep. And then the next guy who they think knows exactly how much they know about what is left and what is right tends to disagree with them on probably 50% of it.
Yep.
So
exactly.
Yeah.
It's like,
so that's why I think you need AI to do a clustering analysis on what's left and what's right.
But I feel like these terms have taken on like the level of subjectivity of a Picasso painting.
Exactly. Well, I mean, to me, like, it seems pretty obvious. Like, Nazis were fascists. Fascists come from Benito Mussolini's party, which was the Fascista Party, which they were a very hardcore right-wing party. And that's all right, but that doesn't mean everybody on the right is a fascist.
Right.
And that doesn't mean everybody on the left is a commie. Like,
but
that's the kind of shit that I fucking hate. Like, everybody calls everybody a commie and a fascist and all this. Yeah. No, guys, you need to fucking calm down.
Yeah. That kind of talk is for people that should be in the street selling pens from an invisible cup. And then the other thing is the feeling I got is that no one who is quite obviously a leftist or more on the left than they would be on the right didn't want to say that there is anything within the Nazi platform or anything. It's like nothing about what they did could possibly be categorized with anything on the left.
The left,
and that's just bogus. It's like those two sides of approaching the human condition are not that far apart.
They're certainly not mutually exclusive,
right? And of course you're gonna. A conversation we need to have is it more left or more right to eradicate Jews?
I don't think that's a left or right thing at all. I mean, because, Stalin was killing off Jews the same way Hitler was, so like.
Right. But I think there's a lesson in that, right?
Yeah.
There's an important lesson, because I get the sense that people who lean more on the left are unwilling to admit that, and they more go down the road of the no true Scotsman fallacy and say, well, they weren't really leftist. But I find that the people on the right are happily willing to admit, like the Jordan Peterson thinker type, like, I would have been a Nazi, if I was there. I would have been sucked into that, which I think Jordan Peterson has said quite a few times in different lectures. When you come to the realization that you would have been, quite, if you're quite an agreeable person, generally, if you look at what's that?
You said with the level of agreeability, because I was like, I don't know, I was just thinking, well, we know for a fact there were people in Germany who went against the Nazi party. And that, again, I don't think that was necessarily right or left. I think that came down to people just being like, man, maybe this isn't a good thing to be putting people in fucking camps and killing them.
Yeah.
Shit.
No, I would even go far as to say that, it seems like it's hard to find someone that was apologetic of that activity.
Yep.
Like, or people that even said like, yeah, I heard rumors that was going on, but I didn't believe it.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people claimed to have been under the impression that the Jews were being pushed out and kicked out of the country, but killed, gassed. It seems like a lot of, the testimonies I've seen, interviews of the Germans, like really old interviews from like the 50s and 60s, that a lot of those German people claim to say that, a lot of us were for getting the Jews out. We thought they were squandering money and all this other stuff, but they would have never ever had agreed to have this slaughtering, right?
Yeah, to me, I guess what I was saying, that I was thinking more along the lines of the start when they started putting, Jews into ghettos. So what they would do is they'd like take a neighborhood and build a brick wall around the entire fucking neighborhood and be like, okay, everybody's out, Jews get in. Like right off the bat, like when Anne Frank was taken in, that was the time she was taken in. It wasn't, later in the occupation. They did get found out and got sent to Dachau, I believe, and
right.
We all know what happened.
Yeah, it's pretty it's fascinating and horrific and human. That's the thing people don't want to they don't want to label that as human like.
Yeah.
They don't want to call it that, but it's as ape as anything else that we do. It just.
I think the one big difference, like think about the difference between like Genghis Khan and like Hitler. I think the biggest difference is the efficiency and like the I don't know, like Genghis Khan was just going and like taking over places. Yeah, they'd kill everybody and all that kind of stuff, but they weren't necessarily like rounding people up and like being like taken down. Okay, we've got this person. They had like, ledgers of everybody who they're taking in. And like, it was just very like, I don't know, surgical. And I think that was part of the biggest shock of the whole thing.
Yeah.
With Genghis Khan though, before they took over something, they gave the conquered the option of joining the army instead of fighting against them. And if they joined the army, then they were in the army.
Right. That's the
and
thing
they didn't
that
get
was
slaughtered.
That's the thing that was particularly sick about Hitler's. Hitler would refer to other human beings as insects, and he didn't just do that like as a pejorative. Like he fundamentally believed that they needed to be fumigated and cleaned because they were filthy, and he had this obsession with cleanliness and always feeling not clean enough. Like he long baths every day. Just like he could never get things clean enough, could never scrub the country enough of the dirt, It's
fucking crazy.
Yeah.
I had a grandfather that was like that to some extent.
Oh yeah.
I mean, he didn't kill Jews, but he brushed his teeth 12 times a day.
Oh really?
And he washed his hands like every 30 minutes his whole life.
Yeah.
But brushing 12 times a day, isn't that bad for your gums?
Oh, that's bad for the enamel.
gum line and
his routine was he would switch up his what he brushed his teeth with.
Wow.
So he'd brush his teeth with baking soda, and then he'd brush his teeth with hydrogen peroxide the next time, and then he'd brush his teeth with something. He didn't always use because
that's what I use still to this day. Like that's the only brand of toothpaste I use is Arm & Hammer. I go to a friend's house and they got Crest, and I'm like, "What are you doing? This shit's garbage."
Fluorine. Nazis used fluorine.
In their drinking water. That's how they made the frogs gay.
Zyklon B. Zyklon B, was that a derivative?
No, that was the agent, wasn't it? The gas agent.
Yeah, Zyklon B is what they pumped into the chambers and shit.
Right.
Oh, cyanide. Okay, yeah. So it was a cyanide pesticide invented in Germany in the 1920s.
Right.
And that's what they had fucking dumped into fucking Jesus Christ, man.
Yeah, that's brutal.
Killing people's bad, okay?
Okay.
Killing people bad. Okay.
Dude, the episode when fucking Mackie passed that weed around in class and the bag ended up missing. Do you guys remember that episode? He gets fired and starts like taking acid, and his head gets all huge. You got to know that one, Doctor.
I don't watch very much South Park.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm the same.
Once in a while I see one, and it's always freaking hilarious. I just don't have that much time to sit down and watch. They make South Park. They make more South Parks than I have TV watching time in my life.
Yeah.
So I couldn't possibly keep up with it.
Well, it's down to only like 10 episodes a year now, so that's not too bad. I don't know, just one of those shows, like being from Boulder, like I've watched every single episode of South Park that's ever come out. They're just something that I remember when it first came out, like me and my buddies like went down and like a bar was open for like underage kids, and you can go there and they had big bowls of fucking Cheetos, and they had a sticker on them called Cheesy Poofs, and like it was a whole like thing to like go and watch South Park in Boulder. Is interesting.
Nice. Well, what should we chat about today? It's been too long since we chatted about.
What is Mace doing just sitting in the
I don't know.
Trav?
I'm gonna pull him up. I'm gonna
right now.
Mace, I'm violating you.
So let me know if anyone wants to do this one. Don. Do we call him Don or Dan?
It's Don.
Don.
I know it's so hard for me to say that.
Yeah, well, and then Amy goes, Dan.
Yeah.
He should really change his name to Don, and everyone would say
the Don.
Right.
How about just the Don?
What that reminds me of is the movie Blue Harvest, which is a Family Guy Star Wars, and the Don. I thought it smells bad on the.
That's called a tauntaun, actually.
I know.
The Family Guy, they called him Don.
It was Don. It was Don on the Family Guy. Blue Harvest. Yeah.
In the Family Guy,
he had the face. He had the face of Anthony, the guy from the Andy Griffith.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, because Chris was Han Solo, right?
Yeah. So, no, Han was the dad. I don't know what was the dad.
Peter
was Han Solo, and Chris was Luke.
Yeah,
Luke. Oh, that's right.
So, so Don had an episode where he was talking about culture. No, not culture. What's the one? That freaking anti-modern. Postmodernism. He was talking about postmodernism, and it just turned into an interruption fight. And there was like some things that I actually wanted to learn there about
who was fighting villain. Was it villain and Don?
Yeah, no, it was like everyone dogpile on villain.
Yeah,
because Don Don's like, okay, let's have a talk about cultural Marxism, and villain comes in, cultural Marxism is stupid. Like that's his position, and then everyone's like, okay, you just called me stupid. Oh no, I'm sorry, I'm conflating cultural Marxism and postmodernism. So it turned into this like
I was going to say, I don't remember that at all.
Go ahead, Chad.
Well, I do have to say,
there were some things I wanted to learn about the tenets of postmodernism and the tools that they say that they're going to use.
Yeah,
and I thought some of them actually sounded like good ideas, and some of them sounded like bad ideas. But we didn't get a chance to talk about whether ideas were bad because we were talking about whether you are interrupting me right now.
Yeah, and I do want to say this: the label of postmodernism is fucking terrible. It's way too nebulous. Like there are art, movies, music that are postmodern because it's the same way that you have like modern art. Andy Warhol, was one of the purveyors of modern art and all that kind of stuff. And postmodern is just a different thing altogether. When you're talking about philosophers, you have like Foucault, Derrida, and like three guys who like maybe it later got labeled postmodernism. I don't think they actually ever used that term themselves, but it's all stuff that everybody pretty much agrees on, except once they hear the term postmodernism, they like fucking
shit their pants.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think it's all. I would say it's not all stuff that pretty much everyone agrees on. But I heard a few things that I would probably agree with, and I heard a few things which I think are going to blow up. And we didn't get a chance to get into it, and.
Yes, so I mean, one of the biggest things about postmodern philosophy is like relativism, and like you'll hear like conservatives for the longest time always railed against fucking moral relativism, but now like everybody sort of recognizes different situations, like you have different moral systems in different situations, and you're more in the situation is or your position is relative based on that situation that you're in. I mean, this is not, it's not something.
For everyone listening,
crazy.
I'll just do a quick Stanford EDU reading on postmodernism. That postmodernism is indefinable is a truism. However, it can be described as a set of critical, strategic, and rhetorical practices employing concepts such as difference, repetition, the trace, the what is a simulacrum, and hyper reality to destabilize other concepts such as presence, identity, historical progress, epistemic certainty, and and then a bunch of other stuff here.
Yeah, I mean, it gets so fucking heady to where it actually really is. Like people freak out about it, but when I even try to get into it, I don't know, it doesn't keep my attention really all that long.
What purpose does the label serve?
I can definitely put that if you need it.
Well, I think right now the label is mostly served as a pejorative against your enemy. I think that's the biggest thing that the term postmodernism is used for right now.
What do you think, Chad?
Yeah, I would definitely equate it to a similar structuring as like art movements, right? There was a modern art movement. So now, since we have passed that modern art movement that started in the turn of the century, we have gotten to what's now known as postmodernism. And we don't really have a better term for it yet because it is relatively ambiguous, but we want to define and separate it from a modernist idea. In a philosophical sense, it's very similar. We had modernist thinkers, and then since then we have had people fight against the ideas that were enshrined in a modernist point of view. So we call that postmodernism. Yeah, that is incredibly broad. So it's useful to, specify, but in the colloquial sense, yeah, now it's definitely just it's like socialist. It's like, oh, it's a bad thing, so it's that. Or cultural Marxist usually is interchangeable with postmodernist, and it's like, well, what are those things? Well, they're bad. So
well, how about? So you mentioned cultural Marxist, socialist. How about alt-right, Chad?
I would argue no, but they're a very similar classification if you use them correctly. Like if you say that person is part of the alt-right, that's an umbrella term to describe a set of political ideologies. I guess, yeah, it's been used as a negative term. I would argue that that's dishonest, though, so I don't tend to deal with that when I'm talking to people who have good discourse.
Interesting. Hidden 3423. How's it going? What do you got, Hidden? If you're new to Discord, you do have to unmute your mic. If you play with it, you'll figure it out.
Maybe we could have a day where we define postmodernism.
Oh.
That would be fun.
I was going to say, I think that was what Don tried to do.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, like it degraded into an argument about who said what, and they were just
right
having a gossip about what some ancient philosopher thought, or who, you know, they weren't talking about the ideas, they were talking about the people who had the ideas.
Yeah, that's
and whether those people were good or right, and the conversation was not about the ideas. So that's why I wanted to continue the conversation.
Right.
Just to get it on a higher level.
Yeah, well, I'm not personally, very deeply entrenched in postmodernist philosophy, so I'm not very well researched into it. But
well, maybe we don't have the right people here to do it then.
Yeah, I think Don would be a good example, especially if that was his topic. Oh, sorry.
I would rather, for the sake of today, what are some? I like just going with claims, positive claims that people make that might grind your gears. I know you, Chad, you've been going at the yeah. Go ahead, John. Oh, it looks like Hidden unmuted. Hidden, what do you got?
I figured it out.
Oh, sweet.
Man,
welcome.
This thing is confusing.
Yeah, it can be. Once you get used to it, it'll make sense. But yeah, it's different for sure.
I think I would just echo kind of what I've heard. I think postmodernism's become so broad. If I wanted to talk about it, I'd have to have like a specific topic,
right?
And then I could go into more depth from there.
Yeah, cool. What are some things you're interested in? What do you like talking about, debating about? I see you're new to the Discord, so.
I'm up for just about anything.
Oh, okay, cool.
I'm a pretty classic introvert, so.
Oh yeah.
I listen to, religious stuff, political stuff.
Nice. So do I.
Yeah, I mean, I listen to you. I listen to a bunch of atheists on YouTube.
Cool.
I listen to people I don't agree with, people I agree with.
Nice.
I run the game. I run the gamut.
Well, you'll really enjoy this Discord because we got people from all kinds of different worldviews. We got Muslims, Christians, Hindus, atheists, people who don't know what they are. And all kinds of people with all kinds of political leanings, people who speak multiple languages and all kinds of stuff. But today for Test Your Skepticism, basically if anyone's got a claim or an interesting topic, it's pretty open, so feel free to jump in at any time.
So was the discussion about Nazism?
Well, when I first started the stream, my old label was on my YouTube stream still, but I switched over to Test Your Skepticism. But we can talk about it if you'd like, or if anyone's interested in doing that. I did.
Oh no, I don't. Yeah. We don't have to. I just was curious.
Yeah. Also, weird.
That moose must have reached down to grab some brush or something.
I got the antenna right on its head.
Yeah.
Dal, you had an idea. You were about to say something.
Oh, well, it was vaguely postmodernist. I was going to say how I kind of hate the postmodernist idea that objective reality essentially has no purpose, and so we shouldn't think of it as existing. I hear that point made a lot, and I think it's a postmodernist one.
Oh, I'm intrigued.
Yeah.
They'll say.
Sounds like something someone would use if science demonstrates something that doesn't quite fit the way you wish reality was, and then you might seek to want to strike that from the record. It's actually yeah. Go ahead.
I usually get that sort of rhetoric from not science deniers, from people who generally agree with science. They'll just say that science is deciding upon the agreed upon facts that we live by rather than discovering the nature of reality.
Wow. Yeah, that's
interesting.
Yeah, that stuff's frustrating. I mean, for anyone that understands that science is really our best endeavor to understand what's objective and escape our own individual sense-making apparatus, when we put our eye into a very high-powered microscope or telescope, we are diving into a new heights for our sense-making apparatus, something that we cannot do without technology, without the added mechanisms. So, yeah, it's just, science is our greatest attempt at objectively determining what is going on in reality. And anyone who says otherwise, I would like them to demonstrate a better way to go about that, And then if they're going to just simply claim that there is nothing objective out there, well, I would say that there's an objectively correct way to approach the stifling of leukemia, and then there's just objectively incorrect ways of doing that. Giving someone suffering from leukemia cotton candy is not a treatment that's been demonstrated to work in objectively. But chemotherapy can help.
Yeah, I'm actually really interested to know who, do you have any specific people that come to your mind when you think of that argument, Dalpsu, or?
It's usually just randos that I come across. Generally, they're arguing for either a type of idealism where they believe that the mind is the fundamental thing that creates the universe.
Right.
And they'll kind of, in my opinion, confuse their own ability to understand the world with the world itself, or they'll kind of confuse their perception of the world with the objective world. And so I kind of see it all the time, although I don't know if any mainstream philosophers take that point of view, although I'm sure they're out there.
Right.
Well, yeah, the thing about that is I think what happens is someone reads something about how all of our sense-making apparatus, let's say our eyesight and what we perceive through our eyes, light's going to interact slightly differently in a slightly different way from observer to observer, and then someone will extrapolate that and say, oh my God, we're all experiencing a different reality, man. And I guess that reality means it's objective because we would use our sight and our touch and everything to measure things. So we all have our own reality. Our brains are making up our own reality. Well, that's in the metaphysical sense, yes. But everything we understand, everything that that science has illuminated for us, when we've gone through the entire process, the falsification process, to see where our individual sense-making apparatus may have steered us wrong, it just tells us that, an apple is made up of these molecules. Voila. And sure, sometimes we're going to perceive an apple to be more pink than it is red, and people will disagree on that and be like, I see pink, I see red. But we already have a scientific understanding, an objective scientific understanding as to why that is. It's like I know it's this like romantic idea to think that there's so much mystery and it's stuff behind all that, but yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's about as consistent as I could make it. I do. I want to know and kind of get somebody's take on the possible differentiation between something that is conceptually true and objectively true. And let me give a little bit of background, I guess. I've always had a hard time discussing things like morality, right, with people who disagree with my point. When I say, hey, morality is subjective or relative, they'll come back with, well, morality is actually objective. And ironically, a lot of times, both of us will have a very similar moral framework and come to very similar moral conclusions. However, there's still that fundamental difference. And I've been attempting to figure out, like, why. Is it possible that we can draw a line between something that is conceptually true and something that is objectively true? Is that a comfortable distinction, or is that just kind of a distinction without a difference in that conceptually true just means logically consistent?
People should talk about what kind of truth they're talking about. It's true that that Captain Hook in Neverland exists in a metaphorical truth sense. It's like, yeah, it exists as soon as the artist created it. Okay, and this is essentially Jordan Peterson's God.
Yes, okay.
Yeah, yep. So like we have this, this metaphorical realm of truth. It's true that one of my characters that I have created. Oh wait, is that a good one? No, it's true. It's true that you have. I think the Captain Hook example's good enough. It's true that Captain Hook lives in Neverland, metaphorically, but he doesn't actually live in Neverland.
Right.
And this is that exact example is the thing that Sam Harris and Jordan Peterson go back and forth for, 2 long podcasts and 4 long
that's
live discussions.
Specifically what I've been listening to recently to, reiterate and try to re-solidify my stance on some of these. But right. I wonder about the charitability of accepting something as, conceptually or metaphorically true, and how that gets conflated with what is objectively true or I think phenomenologically consistent.
I think it's really helpful to be charitable in any way you can when you're engaging in discourse, as long as you shouldn't have to swallow a shit milkshake ever in discourse. But there's a way to give someone a carrot and not have to drink the shit milkshake as you're doing it. You can say that, instead of saying, well, I think you have a retarded idea of what truth means because truth is only this and I will only accept it like if you say it in this way. I think there's a way to say, oh, okay. Well, the way you're describing truth, I would maybe say, are we talking more of a truth as a metaphor? And then someone like Jordan will be like, well, yeah, everything's metaphor, man. Think about it. It's like our language is based in metaphor. Everything's based in metaphor. Everything we do every day is based in. We have stories written in it, and that's a very very artistic way of looking at the human condition, and I think it's an attempt to figure out what consciousness is essentially doing or coming up with, and how it's how consciousness or the mind, whatever you want to call it, is making sense of what the sense making apparatus is taking in. So your touch, your what you're hearing, what you're seeing, seeing apples in a tree reminds you of narrative or story, or reminds you of farming, or the historical human struggles to grow enough food, like all these different structures that might help you understand those things better. But
right.
Yeah.
So does the analogy of the Hook story, are you saying that, could we say that if God exists conceptually, he then is the ground for objective morality? Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Ooh, I wouldn't say so.
I would say that seems to be where that conflation that I was talking about comes.
So is it
okay?
Yeah. Is it that? So sometimes people like you want to talk about what actually exists, and just tell me if I'm wrong here, Chad, but you want to talk with someone about what actually exists, what actually is going on in reality, and someone will say, well, I think it's true that God exists, and you say, well, what do you mean by that? It's like, well, God is written into our metaphorical structure, so it exists, and is that where you're like, well, I don't want to call that existence because it's metaphysical?
I think we're on the right track. I was losing you a little bit there. I am on my way home, so I wasn't quite able to get the most of it. As a general rule, when all of a sudden that metaphorical truth becomes a basis or a yardstick, so to speak, to measure what is and can be objective, is when I take issue.
Yeah, if someone's going to say like, something exists objectively, then that is in the realm of science. That is the alarm system to say, oh, okay, scientific method time. Let's see what we got to put in. Let's observe something. Let's create a hypothesis. Let's engage with logic, epistemology, evidence collection, evaluation, falsification, all the kind of things that one could use in trying to see if something, if a claim is or can be demonstrated.
Right.
Yeah. I noticed a lot of chat going on in the COVID-19 tab.
Oh yeah, it's actually been really productive. I think, at least.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were talking quite a bit about just the vaccine controversy above anything else. What the effects of COVID are, what are sources through which we gain our information, all that sort of thing. Kafka has come in with some really good sources as well, pretty consistently, kind of sporadically sprinkled through the COVID tab here. She's had a couple good ones, especially earlier on.
And when you say good sources, what metric are you using?
So I'd say good insight. Let me correct my words there. On top of actual just, academic journals and
Right.
A mix of a couple different scholarly articles and things like that.
Yeah, I noticed that.
So.
Okay, so if you want, you can test my skepticism on the COVID-19 what you might call
Rock
the
and
vaccine
roll.
controversy.
Let's do it.
I would love to. I'll tell you what my claim is, and it's hard to call it a truth claim, but I would say it's an unknown claim.
All right.
Or a lack of knowledge claim, and I would like to push back against, let's just say, the government narrative. Oh man, where did my phone go? I'm gonna lose it here. I put my phone down somewhere. I'm gonna get out of range of it if I search the wrong way. So one of the problems that I have with the government narrative that they've been telling us is the way that deaths are counted.
Yep.
And that informs how much of a scare factor everybody has in the way that they react to said pandemic. I don't doubt there's a pandemic or that there's a virus.
Yeah.
Some people say, oh, it's just a flu. I don't believe that.
Yeah.
Sure, there's an actual virus, right? They've got the genome mapped. I don't know how they could have done that if the virus doesn't exist. But then the way you count deaths.
Yep.
Okay. I don't like that. I'm sure people. So when they say there's 600,000 people died from COVID, I think it would be accurate and precise to say 600,000 people died with COVID.
Right.
But not necessarily from COVID. So I have a beef with the causality because there's people with, well, let's just say the vast majority at one point had 2 and 3 different comorbidities, and many of those people were likely to die within not that long of a period of time anyway, because they have heart disease and emphysema and diabetes and obesity. And so when one last stressor comes in and takes out the person that was essentially a dead man walking, you say that person died from COVID, and therefore everybody else needs to be scared, right? And so so to me that's immoral to frame things that way. But that's the way it is, and I think some people need to have that. Let's call it an overcount.
Right.
Now,
what's
the real count?
So there's a lot of there's actually a lot of people in medicine that would agree with the general sentiment of what you're saying, and now think about this, Doolittle. Even if the number is inflated by, let's say, 25%, 30%, or even 50%,
or 300%.
300%. Ooh. So if that, if that was the case, I think we would have much stronger data indications supporting that. I think what we generally get. Look, and I don't want to say that what you're talking about doesn't happen in some cases where you have someone who's, gone through chemotherapy and they're, on the brink of death because that's what you're trying to trick the cancer into thinking. And then unfortunately they come into contact with COVID-19 and it absolutely kills them. No problem. There is some of that, but but like I said, when someone, and this is more of a problem. Like when I think of it's a human psychological problem where when someone dies, they want to get the best, most true answer possible, right? Like say your child was killed in a car accident, and they say, your child was killed in a car accident. Usually people do want to know, how did they die? In order to get closure, what was it? Did they break their neck, or what was the actual thing that happened? Yeah. Sometimes it's hard to determine that. depending on what the aftermath is. And if we look at COVID-19, it's like or any really bad disease. Sometimes it's tough to tell exactly what thing did what thing was the final thing that either stopped the heart, stopped the lungs, stroked out the brain. That in medicine, that sometimes can be difficult, right? Like
I would say oftentimes it's very difficult.
If you read death certificates, a lot of the time they will talk about their breath gave way at this time and they passed peacefully. Like if it's an elderly person who's in hospital care, but I guess what you're saying is you want to know the number of how many people would have died anyway had they not got COVID, right?
Right. Well, so to me, the answer is all of them. Every single person that's born dies.
Yeah.
And I think it's a more useful. I think there's a more useful metric than saying somebody died. But how much longer would they have lived if it were not the case that, or how many, there's a useful metric of how many, let's just say how many years of human life were eliminated by the virus.
Okay.
And we can if you want to compare the response, if you want to compare the severity of the response or the adverse effect of the response to the adverse effect of the virus, you can compare something that's quantitative in terms of how many man years of life were destroyed by the lockdowns.
Yeah, I actually have I have some data on that. I'm just going to pull it up.
Right. So I think that's a useful comparison. And if you just say 500,000 people died, okay, all people have value, right? But you can't make a comparison. I mean, like if you ask any objective person, is it better to let an elderly person that's in hospice die 3 months earlier than they would have otherwise, or imprison a free man for 1.5 years? I know imprison is a strong word, but
I was going to say
if you had to do some moral calculus, is it more moral to imprison a person who hasn't committed a crime for 1.5 years, or to allow someone who was already about to die earlier?
Before we respond to Doolittle, and everyone will get a chance here, I just wanted to read from this BBC.com article, and it's titled COVID-19 Disruptions Killed 228,000 Children in South Asia, says UN report. And I'm going to post this in COVID-19. I'm also going to post on YouTube. I'm going to read through this first, and then we can get some responses. The disruption in healthcare services caused by COVID-19 may have led to an estimated 239,000 maternal and child deaths in South Asia, according to a new UN report. It's focused on Afghanistan, Nepal, Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka, home to some 1.8 billion people. The report found that women, children, and adolescents were the worst hit. South Asia has reported nearly 13 million COVID cases and more than 186,000 deaths so far. Many countries, including those in South Asia, responded to the pandemic with stringent lockdowns. While hospitals, pharmacies, and grocers remained open, almost everything else shut down. The report, direct and indirect effects of COVID-19 pandemic and response in South Asia. I'm going to post the report too, because there's a PDF of it here. And we should take a look at this to actually, give some time to the, Doolittle, what Doolittle's raising about, the worries of overreaction or fear mongering, I think, is the at the core of what he's talking about. We started off with some different things to begin with, but let me just get back to this. Examines the effect of these government strategies on healthcare, social services, including schools and the economy. It estimates that there have been 228,000 additional deaths of children under 5 in these 6 countries due to crucial services ranging from nutrition benefits to immunization being halted. It says the number of children being treated for severe malnutrition fell by more than 80% in Bangladesh and Nepal, and immunization among children dropped by 35% and 65% in India and Pakistan, respectively. The report also says that child mortality rose the highest in India in 2020, up by 15.4%, followed by Bangladesh at 13%. Sri Lanka saw the sharpest increase in maternal deaths, 21.5%, followed by Pakistan's 21.3%. It also estimates that there have been some 3.5 million additional unwanted pregnancies, including 400,000 among teenagers due to poor or no access to contraception. The full effect of the pandemic and ensuing lockdowns is just starting to become clear as countries take stock of their public health and education programs. Experts in India already fear that malnutrition rates will be significantly worse across the country when the data pours in over the next few months. Some countries in South Asia, like India, are still battling a surge in infections. While the nationwide lockdown ended in June last year, several states and districts have resorted to intermittent lockdowns to arrest the spread of the virus. Last piece here, the interruption to health services also affected those suffering from other diseases. The report predicts an additional 5,943 deaths across the region among adolescents who couldn't get treated for tuberculosis, malaria, typhoid, and HIV/AIDS. Now, so there was a couple things, Doolittle. You first started talking about, questioning the accuracy of the death count, which there may or may not be significant discrepancy. Are you willing to? Is it plausible to you that there may be more deaths caused by COVID-19 than the 600,000 that we have estimated
in the U.S.? You're talking about?
Yeah.
Is it plausible that that's an under? You're asking if it's plausible that that's an undercount?
Yeah, like how likely? What kind of statement would you make that?
No, I'm close to 100% certain.
You're almost
that
certain.
That's I'm close to 100% certain that that's an undercount.
Okay. Now,
because
I was going to ask you why you thought that. Yeah.
The mechanism of calling something a COVID death. Now, if I'm wrong. I
think you're making the statement that it was an overcount, right?
That's an undercount.
Oh,
so there was more than 600.
Because I would say that there are very few people who died with COVID, and so to become a COVID statistic. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. You die with the symptoms of COVID, and then they do a COVID test on you, or an antigen test, or a PCR test on you, either after you present with symptoms, or post-mortem. And if you get a positive COVID test, then you become a COVID death statistic. I don't think there's a lot of people that died with a runny nose, and they called that a COVID death without testing them first. But I do think there could be a lot of people that died and did not get tested.
Right, because you can imagine
they could have died from COVID or with COVID, and there was no hospital. Family buried them in the back acres.
Yeah.
There's almost certainly some people who died with COVID that were not counted.
Sure.
And I think the mechanism of counting someone they have to have, now if I'm wrong that they have to have a positive test and a doctor could just say, oh, he was coughing when he came in the hospital, I'm not going to test him, burn his body, call it a COVID death.
So this is a good question. This is a good question. Now I want to read this from the College of Physicians and Surgeons of British Columbia, where I live, and then I'll open it up where people can question Doolittle and continue to question the validity of some of the claims he's made. So guidance for certifying COVID-19 deaths. The following information was submitted by the BC Vital Statistics Agency. Oh, I'm going to post this in COVID-19. And guys, all you have to do to get this information is just get on that old Google there, and it'll outline it for you. So with the World Health Organization declaring COVID-19 a pandemic and subsequent increasing mortality from the virus worldwide, there is increased importance on certifying these deaths correctly. So number one, recording COVID-19 on the medical certificate of cause of death. COVID-19 should be recorded on the medical certificate of cause of death for all descendants where the disease caused or is assumed to have caused or contributed to death. So let's read that again. Number one, recording COVID-19 on the medical, and I'd like to get here. We'll go through these, and then I'd like to get your guys' response if you think these are sound. So number one, recording COVID-19 on the medical certificate of cause of death. COVID-19 should be recorded on the medical certificate of cause of death for all descendants where the disease caused or is assumed to have caused or contributed to death. What do you guys think of that?
Well, does that mean it has to have been detected, or can a doctor just assume that the person had it?
Where the without
a diagnosis?
It does say, or is assumed to have caused, or contribute to death. So, by the College of Physicians and Surgeons of British Columbia, there can be assumed to have caused. Any other responses to that one, or would you like me to keep going?
Yeah, so I think that whittles away the...
Go ahead, Scott.
I was going to say that's sort of an interesting one because, this is something I remember people saying, been like, oh, well, people didn't necessarily die from COVID. It was because they're obese. Yeah, but if they didn't get COVID and they were still obese, would they have died? So that in and of itself is... So if you have extenuating circumstances and you get something and you die from it, that doesn't mean you don't die from that thing,
Right.
If
so
you know where I'm going with that.
Yeah, totally. So that's a general statement. And what do you think about the terminology and how it's communicated by the College of Physicians here? That part, the is assumed to have caused. What do you think about that?
Yeah, but I think that's like, terminology that they use that's sort of like inside ball, for people in that profession. There's like many professions they have their own jargon for, and I do think it's like certain things with like in science, people say it's a theory, and then people are like, oh, it's a theory, but they're actually thinking about hypothesis, and there's like different meanings for like what's actually being said. I think that has a big part with anytime you read any sort of medical information of what's actually going on. Is there is something else going on there in the way that they're wording it?
Okay.
They're wording it for sort of a specific reason.
So assumption. I'm just going to look up the medical terminology. Working of lack of. Okay. We should look into the to see if there is anything in the terminology in medicine where assumed means more like educated guess based on some evidence, but we should look at that because you wouldn't want to hear. Just imagine your family member just died. Say it's your daughter, or just imagine your son or something, and then they say, "Well, we assume that COVID-19 has caused this death." what would your response be? Would you want to say, well, I don't want an assumption. I would like to know what caused the death, or would you be okay with hearing from a physician that, or from the emergency room doctor or whoever that,
I don't know, just me personally, just because I know like the way, just how it actually works. Doctors aren't omniscient. They don't know everything, and they are just going off the best assumptions that they have. I would like to say if anybody knows an actual medical doctor who'd ever like to come on here, that would be fucking awesome.
Yeah. Well, this is something we can also look at too, guys. Like, you can look at like certain terminology that's used in medicine for what's it called, for insurance reasons. Certain wording is used. So let me read this one more time and see, and anyone can feel free to have a say. COVID-19 should be, and this is from, again, the College of Physicians and Surgeons of British Columbia. I gave you guys the link in the COVID-19 tab in the Pangburn library. Number one, and this is the guidance for certifying COVID-19 deaths. Number one, recording COVID-19 on the medical certificate of cause of death. COVID-19 should be recorded on the medical certificate of cause of death for all descendants where the disease caused or is assumed to have caused or contributed to death. So you guys can pull up that document if you want to have a read of it. Does anyone have any more points on anything they want to say about that first point on this guidance document?
Yeah, for sure. So I would definitely heavily emphasize the individual, or the quote unquote frontline doctor's ability to use their discretion and the trust that's placed in them to be able to understand that when you say, hey, you have to make an assumption in this case, that is literally just a way of saying that, hey, be cognizant of the diagnostic criteria, make sure that this case matches that criteria or aligns so closely that it would be safe to assume, and then you go off that. So it sounds kind of like a gotcha question, and I don't know if that's necessarily a correct characterization.
What's a gotcha question?
That's not a correct characterization.
Yeah. I didn't. What's the gotcha question?
If someone says, well, look, they said that they have to assume that it's COVID, or even when it's assumed, it's like, that's like Lebowski said, that's like, oh, it's just a theory. It's like, well,
yeah, well, we don't have to get into the mind reading of the person. Let me ask you, Chad, if you're, and I'd like to get you hanging, Chad, how you would feel about this. If someone said, if let's say your sister, your brother, someone you loved died, and let's say it's the emergency room physician and instead of a nurse, and they come up and say, your family member has died, and as it stands right now, and what's likely going to go on the death certificate, it's going to be a COVID-19 caused death because we are assuming that to be the cause.
Yeah. Speaking from experience, that's not necessarily uncommon, and I don't see any issue with that. Now, of course, you always, or at least in most countries, always have the option to continue further tests or to ask for some sort of autopsy or post-mortem tests, but that doesn't necessarily change the fact that, hey, a professional had specifically assumed in this case that this case had met the diagnostic criteria needed to be considered whatever diagnosis he gave. So I wouldn't feel bad about it. Sure, if the opportunity for extra testing is there, I would love to do that because more information is always better. Yeah. But that doesn't necessarily mean that there's, it's bad or wrong to say that, I assumed he had COVID.
Yeah. And also this is the first point on this list of 4 points for guidance for certifying COVID-19 deaths.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, let's get to number 2 here, and welcome to those of you who've joined us. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I do have just a couple of things to know. Really, like it's just one. I mean, there are a few um, hallmark symptoms that have happened with COVID that haven't been really seen in a lot of other illness. Um, is it possible? Yes, but I mean, things like loss of taste and smell, because they were using some things to really diagnose that somebody had COVID, oftentimes when tests weren't available at all. And yeah, things like loss of taste and smell, in addition to all of the other COVID symptoms, is one thing that I think they were using. Um, I mean, strokes, when you're like, if you have a stroke from like insane blood clots at 30 years old, when the average age is like 70 years old, it's unusual.
Yeah, and we'll get
COVID,
we'll get to a little more of that as we move through this list. Did you have anything, Chris, on that first point? What do you think of using, or what do you think, just you as a person, not generally ought or anything, but let's say not with COVID, but if you in a car accident, sometimes some people will want to know, like in a fatal car crash, some people will want to know the exact cause of death, and of course they can't get it. So sometimes they may have to say, we assumed, based on what we do have, we assume that they probably broke their neck and that's what killed them. And then there were, some things followed after that made it hard to identify exactly. There's other possibilities, but we are assuming this was the actual cause. Do you think, if you were in that situation, would that be sufficient for you to hear, how would you feel of hearing a physician say, this is what we are assuming?
I think a physician has to be mindful of their patient's ability to comprehend like medical terminology and weigh, whether they are, that particular family is more ones that I don't want to know about it. I don't want to hear the details, that it's going to be particularly upsetting for them.
Yeah.
Or are they ones that they aren't going to get closure unless they know absolutely every single detail, and they're going to be able to understand it. And even if it's tedious for that doctor, they should go into it to give that family peace of mind. I think it's important for doctors to weigh it on a situation by situation basis. But I mean,
okay, cool. I want to move to number 2, which is terminology. The use, so there's 2 bullet points here. The use of official terminology as recommended by the World Health Organization, i.e. COVID-19, should be used for all certification of this cause of death. I'll read that one more time. And again, I did share this document in the hashtag COVID-19 tab, and with anyone on YouTube who's listening, under terminology, the use of official terminology as recommended by the World Health Organization, i.e. COVID-19, should be used for all certification of this cause of death. Second bullet point, as there are many types of coronaviruses, it is recommended not to use coronavirus, in quotes, in place of COVID-19. This will help to reduce uncertainty for coding and monitoring these deaths, which may lead to underreporting. So, second bullet point again, as there are many types of coronaviruses, it is recommended not to use, quote, coronavirus in place of COVID-19. This will help to reduce uncertainty for coding and monitoring these deaths, which may lead to underreporting. And by the way, just if anyone's new to the conversation, this is coming from the College of Physicians and Surgeons of British Columbia, where I live. Number 3, chain of events. And what we're doing is we're testing Doolittle skepticism today. Doolittle has brought up, the how we're determining what is a COVID-19 death, and the problem, which is a real psychological, human interest and problem of, if your family member, was struggling with cancer for 7 years, and they've been told, they're getting very close to their time is coming up, and they get their last bout of chemo, and the doctors say that they're about to die, and then they die, and then they have COVID-19 in their system, and then people are worried that will be labeled a COVID-19 death when they don't think it should be, but maybe the doctors disagree. So that's what we're testing today. How we're looking at a few different facets of COVID-19, but this particular one we're looking at right now is how we determine what is a COVID-19 death. Number 3, chain of events. Due to the public health importance of COVID-19, when it is thought to have caused or contributed to death, it should be recorded in Part 1 of the medical certificate of cause of death. So one more time, due to the public health importance of COVID-19, this is one of 2 bullet points, by the way, under chain of events. Due to the public health importance of COVID-19, when it is thought to have caused or contributed to death, it should be recorded in Part 1 of the medical certificate of cause of death. Who wants to take on the task of researching what Part 1 means? Maybe we'll get to that in this list, but it'd be different. It would be interesting to know the difference in parts. Bullet point 2, specification of the causal sequence leading to death in Part 1 of the certificate is also important. For example, in cases where COVID-19 causes pneumonia and fatal respiratory distress, both pneumonia and respiratory distress should be included along with COVID-19 in Part 1. Certifiers should include as much detail as possible based on their knowledge of the case, medical records, laboratory testing. So this is great. I love this. Important, for example, I'm going to read this again. And this is number 3, chain of events, bullet point 2. For example, in cases where COVID-19 causes pneumonia and fatal respiratory distress, both pneumonia and respiratory distress should be included along with COVID-19 in Part 1. So they're not just writing down, they're being told not just to write down COVID-19 and call it a day. Pneumonia and respiratory distress. Certifiers should include as much detail as possible based on their knowledge of the case, medical records, laboratory testing, etc. That sounds really good to me. Does anyone think that that is a bad policy to leave out details? Or to include more details?
Include more details?
Yeah, to include more details.
Yeah, more details is good.
Yeah. Now, I think you're going to... so there's another example here. Immediate cause, acute respiratory distress syndrome, conditions leading to the cause, pneumonia, COVID-19. Okay, there's an example they give. Immediate cause, acute respiratory distress syndrome, conditions leading to the cause, pneumonia, COVID-19. Brilliant.
Yes. Something like that makes me think, like, say somebody had COPD, or CPOD, chronic pulmonary cardiac disorder.
Chronic obstructive pulmonary disorder.
Sort of, yeah, COPD, and they got COVID, and they die. I mean, shouldn't that go down as a COVID death? Regardless of whether they had that previous, ailment.
Yeah,
that's going to be a huge problem. But then, COVID's sort of like the nail in the coffin at that point.
And now I'm almost at the end.
I would want to add that a chronic disease isn't cause of death, right? When you have chronic pulmonary obstructive disease or whatever it is, when you die, you still don't die of that. You die of pneumonia, or you die of an asphyxiation. Right. You still don't die.
They're looking at the thing that might. It's like, if your brain, if you stroke out, right? Even if someone was undergoing cancer treatment, if you stroke out, try to imagine what the College of Physicians are going to write on this, on the cause of death. So comorbidities, number 4, final one bullet point with example. There is increasing evidence that people with existing chronic conditions or compromised immune systems due to disability are at greater risk of death due to COVID-19. Chronic conditions may be non-communicable diseases such as coronary artery disease, COPD, like Scott just brought up, and diabetes or disabilities. If the descendant had existing chronic conditions such as those listed above, these should be listed in Part 2 of the medical certificate of cause of death. I'll get to the example. Now, what I also want to do is I want to see how the British Columbia College of Physicians stacks up against, we can pull one from the United States if someone wants to find one, of how they're recording. But let's read it again. There is increasing evidence that people with existing chronic conditions or compromised immune systems due to disability are at greater risk of death due to COVID-19. Chronic conditions may be non-communicable diseases such as coronary artery disease, COPD, and diabetes or disabilities. If the descendant had existing chronic conditions such as those listed above, these should be listed in Part 2 of the medical certificate of cause of death. And an example of this would be, here's the example. Other significant, and this would be written in Part 2, other significant conditions contributing to death, but not related to the disease or conditions causing it. A, B, C, A being coronary artery disease, B, type 2 diabetes, C, COPD. So that would be included in Part 2 on the cause of death certificate. So yeah, I'd like to check in with Doolittle. Doolittle, what do you think about, do you think that's robust enough? Do you think that's fair to families? And do you think that is a good way to go about determining cause of death and whether COVID-19 played a role or a primary role?
Yeah, I think it's good enough to say it played a role.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, and it looks
I just don't agree with a person lying in a coffin with all but one nail in the coffin, and then and then Scott's last nail in the coffin. Oh, COVID was the last nail in the coffin.
Well, I get it. Look, I know what you mean. It's like
I do too. Yeah.
It's like when you think about it philosophically, like if you think about someone's lifespan where they might have had to, say they struggle with like a liver disease. I had a friend that died a couple of years ago. He used to work for me at concerts and stuff, and he had multiple liver transplants his whole life, and it's kind of, does it, and I'm just trying to understand the kind of the feelings behind it. Like if someone was to come in and say, well, let's say his liver disease made affected him in a way that if he would have got COVID-19 likely would have killed him. Would you, Doolittle, want to say, do you think it's more fair or do you find it more pleasurable to say this guy was a warrior who battled liver disease his whole life? He underwent 4 liver transplants, and the scope of the length of his life was never looking good for him, but he kept trudging on. And then at the end, he happened to get COVID-19 and die. Do you feel better saying that, he survived for all these years and eventually his liver disease got him because it weakened him to such a point that something like COVID-19 came in and killed him? Do you find it devalues that human experience by saying COVID-19 killed him?
I don't know if you're talking about on an individual basis. I think that I think it would make me feel better if that was my friend, if they, if they said what the circumstances were.
Right. So
that
you
contributed what they.
And it looks like the physicians of British Columbia would agree with you on that. That would be listed. And
I totally agree with listing all these things.
Yeah.
As contributing factors.
Okay. And
I wouldn't want them to say, this guy died of COVID. He was totally healthy and then he died of COVID. I don't think that's true.
Right. Now, do you think he
was very sick and then he died of COVID?
Now, do you think that's happening anywhere, Doolittle? Like,
or
do you think
which one?
Do you think anyone is saying? Do you think any of the people working in these health facilities that have to deal with dead bodies, do you think when they're writing this down, they're doing due diligence to make sure they write and include all of the contributing factors that there are indications of?
No, I'm sure they do.
Right.
But then when you aggregate the data, and the government starts to make policies surrounding the aggregated data, they ignore the metadata, which includes all the other comorbidities that they're going along with making somebody susceptible. And so they end up making broad policies that affect everybody, even though most people are at a very low risk.
Well, I think there's going to be a lot of changes as to how I think we've learned a lot through COVID-19, and I think there were some measures. I think there are some things we could have done to really like if you're going to do something, if you're going to lock things down, don't do it this pussy ass way, and allow people to go to the fucking grocery store, which I spent a lot of time researching during these supposed lockdown eras, and people are sneezing on everything, fucking touching things. The other person comes along, touches things. Everyone's touching toilet paper. And my thing is that if you really want to go the lockdown route, and even if you're going to do it for a fucking month, then the government should have a plan to kind of militarize from a medicine perspective and lock that shit down and bring people the nice have a program to bring people food in a safe way and all that stuff. But I want to open up the room for a second because I'm really interested to see how the College of Physicians and Surgeons of British Columbia stacks up against some of the others, let's pick a random state. Well, maybe let's look at New York, since they've been really busy with COVID. But yeah, anyone else have anything?
I only have one thing to say. So, like, think about this, doctor. So, say somebody is like this complete lunatic who they've been eating gluten their entire life, and they get COVID. so I just had to make that joke.
They've been smoking straight opium every day, constantly breathing it in through a gas
marijuana. Yeah. Say there's this complete lunatic that's been smoking marijuana and then he gets COVID.
I know that joke would just sit in my brain for me. I had to get it out.
All right.
Marijuana cures COVID. Don't you know that? Just kidding.
Actually, there was a few people on my Facebook. They were like, just like they had these huge blunts when people were locked down, and they were just sucking on these huge blunts, and they were like, well, someone said it on Facebook. It's good enough for me. Oh man.
If you like the person's about to very ill and you attack them, you're to blame, right?
I think Dan, Chad, Chris.
Yeah, you guys, it's
you guys were waiting to make a point.
Yeah,
here.
please do make your points. I'm pulling up the CDC guidance for certifying deaths. We'll take a look at what their language is looking like. But go ahead, guys.
I'm just saying, where do you draw the line between saying it was COVID and
Nivek, I think you're.
The conditions of the
I think your reduction to absurdum example of if you go beat the shit out of someone and they die and they have COVID in their system, that's not going to be recorded as a COVID death, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They're probably not even checking that person for COVID. They're going to look like, this guy's brain was kicked in with a fucking size 11 fucking Doc Martin. I don't think they're really looking for COVID at that point, right?
Right. So it's not, let me say that this is not a dumb question to consider and investigate and seek to clarify. This is what skepticism is all about, and the exercise we're going through right now is how you go about it in this free information age. You know, you can go to the physician's website where you can get the colloquial language version, or you can actually go into more detailing and actually find a YouTube channel of a practicing physician who's dealing with the deaths, the COVID deaths, and is actually, writing these certificates, and you can hear them talking about it and the things that they're considering and the things that they're not. But like YouTube is an excellent resource for that too. And they will have where they practice medicine listed. And one of the reasons why so many, medical institutions have been going on YouTube and have been going on social media and being very loud is because it is a very good time to educate people right now and to help people understand these things.
But I do want to say just one last thing, and I'm going to let everybody talk for a while. Same thing with that. Check out videos, get people's opinions. Another really good resource is JSTOR as well. If you guys don't have an account for that, I would highly recommend getting an account.
Yeah, it's pretty solid. I know it's behind a paywall for me, but I'm looking to get one here soon.
So it's behind a paywall, but you get 5 free articles a month.
Hub.
Definitely already.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Just paste and link whatever you want.
Yeah, and a lot of the stuff that are on these particular sites, like you just listed, Scott, you can also find them, through Google. All of these, the research papers are.
And if it's a research paper that's known and quoted that you hear about, most likely you can kind of read the abstract and get an idea of what's happening.
Exactly.
You can even, a good thing to do when you're reading a research paper is to, read the abstract. If you don't have time to go through the entire thing, scroll down to what's been concluded in this study. And then go to see what some of the criticisms of that particular cited study have been by other experts in the field. If you don't know if you're looking at what virologists have discovered or new research papers in virology, you're going to have a tough time. You're going to have to keep going through and copy and pasting and trying to understand the terminology. But the process of falsification by other experts and other scientists is a beautiful thing. Scientific consensus. So I just posted the CDC.gov vital statistics reporting guidance link. I think this is what we want. Cause of death reporting. I just want to see what they have to say on this. When reporting cause of death on a death certificate, use any information available such as medical history, medical records, laboratory tests, an autopsy report, or other sources of relevant information. Similar to many other diagnoses, a cause of death statement is an informed medical opinion that should be based on sound medical judgment drawn from clinical training and experience, as well as knowledge of current disease states and local trends. So that's a pretty, I am pretty satisfied with that. I think that is a really nice statement under cause of death reporting. Part 1, this section on death certificate is for reporting the sequence of conditions that led directly to death, the immediate cause of death, which is the disease or condition that directly preceded death and is not necessarily the underlying cause of death, UCOD, underlying cause of death, should be reported on line A. The conditions that led to the immediate cause of death should be reported in a logical sequence in terms of time, etiology below it. The UCOD, which is, quote, the disease or injury which initiated the train of morbid events leading directly to death, or B, the circumstances of the accident or violence which produced the fatal injury, end quote. Citation 7 should be reported on lowest line used in part 1. So yeah, that document's a really good, it's got a lot of really good information as well. There's also what you'll see here. Oh, here, this is good. There's a example of a cause of death report here that they have on this document, and you'll see with this particular patient listed in immediate cause, final disease or condition resulting in death is acute respiratory acidosis, and that's given an approximate interval of 3 days, and then sequentially list conditions. COVID-19 is listed in the B section, and this particular patient was given an approximate interval of 1 week. Chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, hypertension. So the things, I mean, and then, we have another example here, a 34-year-old female with no significant past medical history. So they list it as the cause of death as A, acute respiratory distress syndrome, B, pneumonia, and C, COVID-19. So the pneumonia and COVID-19 present for 10 days, and the immediate cause, the final disease or condition resulting in death, was acute respiratory distress syndrome. So all of that is in the COVID-19 tab, and I see you guys have been testing your skepticism, questioning and continuing to question anything, which is what the Pangburn Discord and brand is all about. And I appreciate you guys doing that. Now, any comments, questions? Let's check in with Doolittle. Yeah. Does this eat all your feelings of whether we're playing fast and easy with the labeling of COVID-19 as a cause of death? Or do you think there's still something to investigate here? Because I would love to investigate further if you have another avenue you'd wish to take.
No, I think that the main thing is that, like I said before, I think that there's probably more deaths with COVID.
Right.
Can I say something? Reported.
You know what I want to say too? In the way there is also a communication error, and this is a media thing, where someone will say, they might see COVID as listed as like we just saw in these reports, and I've read quite a few of these cause of death things, where it'll be listed on like D COVID-19 and then a bunch of things ahead of it on A, B, or C, and someone will say another COVID-19, where COVID-19 was, but it wasn't the immediate cause. And some people are interpreting, and I think this just comes down to upgrading our software, upgrading how we communicate these things. Perhaps it would be more helpful to people to understand the difference between immediate cause and like the sequential list of conditions that are leading to the death. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right. So I think that it's more valuable to say have a set of mechanisms by which COVID leads to people's deaths, and then you can really understand how you intervene. In the chain of events that lead to death, and some of the let's just say preventative measures or therapies that were squashed, let's just say didn't address the fact that these preventative measures or the therapies were intervening in a critical in the chain of events that lead to death. And the studies were surrounding not necessarily using those therapies as, at the point where they were so like let's just say, the one that Brett Weinstein is on. Okay, what's that called? It's some lore or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I've got a question on this as
right,
well.
So like the one Brett Weinstein is on. If that's a great prophylactic medicine, and there's plenty of it for everyone in the world, and it would have been easy to ramp up production. It was originally dismissed because people gave it in high doses to people that were pretty much already dead in the last phases of the late stage of the disease, and it didn't save them.
That's not quite how the initial research went, but
so you can argue about that, but I'm talking about the idea of people are overgeneralizing. They're saying, okay, this is a COVID death, and they're not looking at the mechanism of death and saying, okay, these are the things that these are the links in the chain that need to go unbroken in order for there to be a COVID death, and then they're overgeneralizing the response.
Oh, this is the ivermectin. Are you talking about the ivermectin,
for example?
The ivermectin.
So if you learn to break some of those links, if you're looking at the right things intelligently, then you learn to break the links that are in common to everybody, and for people that don't have those links in the first place, you don't need to scare them or interrupt their lives.
Right. So I've done quite a bit of research into a couple of different facets of this argument, and I understand that and correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like you're worried about the application of the data and the propensity of people to, you said, overreact as a government, right?
Oh, yeah.
Well, that makes sense? Okay.
I'd say that's probably accurate.
Okay. Yeah, no, this is super productive. I do have a question, kind of an analogous scenario to the guy who was, or I think it was Pangburn, your friend, who had an issue with his liver, right? So we'd consider that a pre-existing condition, and that is what we should act on a little bit more, I guess, perniciously instead of trying to react to COVID, right? Is that a safe, I guess, line of conversation so far?
I don't know. I think someone with 4 liver transplants, I don't know what.
Yeah, I don't think that
would do for that person.
Yeah.
Just
I don't think that
because I do.
Yeah, I don't think
I have a. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, that was just giving an example of just trying to paint an example of someone who may like just the human experience and the human interpretation of what they think is just to see on a death certificate.
Yeah.
So someone else.
What's that?
Oh, who?
Chad.
Well, yeah, I got an analogous scenario that I'd like to kind of pose and ask you how we should react in this scenario. So imagine a city with people doing their daily business, right? Now, we have a single citizen walking on the street who has a bum leg, or his leg has been deformed since he was born. So that's a pre-existing condition in this scenario. So say there's a tiger walking down the street as well that escaped from the local zoo. Now, that tiger comes and mauls this guy, just absolutely tears him up. The guy starts bleeding, doesn't quite make it to the doctor's office, and dies of blood loss. So you're not necessarily arguing against saying that death is because the tiger got mauled, right? Would you say that that's a safe scenario, or the guy got mauled, right?
Yeah, in that sense, the doctor would probably say you died from blood loss.
Right. But you also wouldn't, as a government or society or anyone else, you wouldn't necessarily take steps to, help with blood loss or better help people with a bum leg when there's a tiger on the loose, right? So in this scenario, wouldn't the tiger be a little bit more like COVID where, hey, I have this threat that is coming. And yes, it is preying on people who have pre-existing conditions, but it's more important to get control of the tiger than it is to, immediately assist with people with pre-existing conditions.
Yeah, that's why in the United States,
I mean, I think
we have a war on terror, but we don't have universal health care, right?
Yeah.
How much money on a war on terror?
I think it would be more accurate to define my position with an analogy of it's a coyote, it's not a tiger, because a perfectly healthy person can beat the crap out of a coyote 90% of the time, and you have to be pretty dang decrepit to not win a fight with a coyote.
So that's interesting.
But a tiger is going to kill any damn person.
Right. Okay.
I gotta say, doctor,
any damn person is going to get mauled by a tiger and stands no chance. COVID is a disease that kills 1 in 10,000 healthy people or young people. And the vast majority of people are just unable. Yeah, go ahead.
I do want to say real quick, doctor, like somebody who's a coyote, somebody gets attacked by a coyote is probably not going to die unless they're a chicken.
Well, they're not going to die, but they, might all of a sudden lose a leg or an arm from the infection that stems from the bite.
Have you guys ever dealt with coyotes? Coyotes are notorious for killing chickens.
Chickens and small dogs. And,
right.
And
so
babies.
here's the interesting.
There are some things that most people are not going to die from coyote bites.
We can absolutely have a discussion on that.
And most people are not going to die from COVID.
But that's something that's significantly different. And I think that's a good avenue to go down, because like I said, I do think that the effects of COVID are far greater than it sounds like most people understand. Now, I'm not saying it's going to kill a bunch of people. So yeah, maybe your coyote argument is right. But if that coyote comes and grabs your leg and then all of a sudden, I don't know, infection makes you lose a foot, well, that person is, forever changed. COVID would be, I guess, a similar analogy to that, especially with the influx of long COVID patients and the constant neurological distress that comes from that, and how prevalent that would be as well. So this will be cool. That'll be good to get into an actual effects of COVID conversation too. Neat.
I think that we're a little bit underplaying how severe COVID can be in those who do get it.
Yes, very much so.
I think there's a serious underplaying of it in this conversation.
Who's underplaying it?
It seems to me like Dr. Doodle is underplaying it and saying that it's, if you're healthy and you're this, nothing will happen. You won't die from it. But there are those who just end up getting hit by it. And the overwhelming response to it, to chalk it up to governments just not either doing the science correct or not looking at the death certificate properly. Hospitals were just full of people. They weren't full of people because of no reason. Right? There was actually a pragmatic reality of what was going on. Yeah. Hospitals were full. Tents were outside. People were on ventilators. This wasn't just a fake thing. And to make this assumption, I just don't see how one can validate the idea that governments were just misreading something in a way.
Right. With extreme measures taking place, they were full. It wasn't like they ignored it as if it was a joke. And
you're right.
So, I mean, I guess you have a different lived experience than I do, because the hospitals around me were completely barren, empty the whole time.
Yeah, we have to be careful, guys, when we say the hospitals were X or the hospitals were Y. Let's talk about specifics and at specific times, right? Let's not.
Yeah.
There's no. It's of no utility to say, it was the apocalypse out there, just for one day. Let's talk about the stretches of time if we're going to make.
Should I be more specific then?
Yes,
I'll be more specific.
I can be more specific around my area.
Yeah.
In areas that were more that were more dense, had a denser population. In areas where the virus was widespread, hospitals were packed.
So yeah,
everywhere. And the fear was getting that. That's
so when you say hospitals were packed, we didn't really have packed hospitals up in Vancouver.
Our ICU is at 120% capacity for like months, and it's still
in
at
multiple
capacity.
hospitals that are around the Kansas City area as well.
And how much of that capacity was COVID-19 related? Do you have an actual number?
You can pull that up on New York Times. They have a tracker for that. You can see what number is COVID patients for all hospitals in the area, any state, any region. I'll see if I can find a link to that.
Yep. I'm gardening as well, so
yeah,
I'll put on video, but I can't.
I'm just saying, like, if anyone is going to bring a claim, it doesn't help anything in Test Your Skepticism Tuesday if we don't have some data that we can pull up and look at, or else it's just people making claims, right?
I don't know why we're only looking at things through one perspective of people probably dying, and it wasn't really COVID. It was that their illness. There could be a potential that there were COVID deaths that weren't counted, and the opposite potential as well.
Well, yeah,
and being in the ground and not being counted.
Doctor actually made that point.
Yeah, doctor acknowledged that.
That was the point doctor made. Yeah.
We're all pretty much in agreement.
So my whole premise that we haven't gotten to is that in order to make an accurate risk-based decision on how you should go about your life, many aspects of how you should go about your life that we haven't.
Someone's got.
Sorry, that was me. I just turned on the YouTube.
No
I wanted
worries.
to give it a thumbs up and.
Yeah. No, it's okay.
Yeah,
YouTube already blocked this stream right when I changed it to COVID-19. Test Your Skepticism. It blocked it.
Oh, did it really? Because I see there's only two watching right now.
Yeah, it keeps kicking them.
Damn it.
Yeah, I've gotten a couple messages saying I got kicked. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
We shouldn't change the name out of
COVID-19. We shouldn't call it that.
Well, I'm on the
call it the China virus.
The China.
China.
That'll be another.
China.
That'll be another episode.
If you want people to be able to make risk-based decisions, personalized risk-based decisions about themselves, the emotional arguments don't help, and the over-aggregation of data and I would say hiding by the press of what are the factors, what are the chain of events that have to happen for you to die from this, who's really the most susceptible. So in order to make a personalized risk-based decision, like I want to make a decision on is, should I get a vaccine? Should I let my daughter get a vaccine? Should I let my wife get a vaccine? Should I go about living my life now that the virus is almost gone and knowing that I probably had it already?
You just get tested for antibodies to make sure you had it.
So
I was gonna say,
how do I make that risk-based decision when the numerator is skewed and the denominator's skewed?
You would have to prove
by political actors. So that's what we're talking about with the numerator. So in terms of a personal risk-based decision, I can't say, there's been 500,000 COVID deaths when the vast majority of those COVID deaths have no similar risk characteristics to me. That number is completely useless to me in making a personalized risk-based decision of whether I should get a vaccine or whether I should continue to isolate myself from the world until later.
I mean, that does sound like
completely useless information.
Personal decision. It's not useful or useless.
Well, it is a personal.
Anyone else?
It is a personal decision.
But
it's useless to everybody.
Go ahead, Scott.
Just
hang on, guys. Go ahead,
doctor.
Scott.
Even with that, doctor, like any decision that you make, unless you have perfect knowledge about all the possible outcomes that could come from your decision, you're going into it blind. And it's like, to me, that's one of the things that I see right now. It's like, this is something that's only been around for like a year and a half, 2 years. We don't have any information on it, really. It's going to take 10 years. And in 10 years, we're going to be able to have like good information. But man, trying to parse raw data into like useful information at this point, I just don't know if we're even close to being there yet. And I think what happens is in that situation, the fundamentally best thing that you can do is err on the side of precaution, right? So So people would rather say, okay, what you need to do is you need to mask up, you need to do all this, as opposed to somebody being like, oh man, you don't need to do anything, and then something really bad happens.
Like, I watch those people on YouTube.
That's the bad side of things. Like, it's especially
I watch those people die on YouTube.
Yeah, with health stuff, it's always probably better to err on the side of caution than it is to err on the side of risk. It's not like you're starting a company and you're not working in the marketplace. You're working in people's health.
Yeah. So the hard question is, which one is caution and which one is risk? When you have, let's just say you have a society that has to have a supply chain, which creates food and goods and services and fuel, and you have children that only get one shot to go through high school.
Yep, there is.
That's the way more interesting. Interesting.
You have experimental human. You have experimental vaccines that are. It's the first time we've ever used this kind of vaccine on a human population, and we are the human experiment. Which one is a risk? Which one's the risk? Is it not taking it the risk, or is taking it the risk?
The data at this point is not nearly as ambiguous.
Yeah, just can I read something, guys? From Hopkins Medicine. So let's go from. Have there been any COVID-19 vaccine safety concerns? I just want to see what date this is, and this is featured experts are Lisa Lockhart. Maragakis, what a name. MD and Gabor David Kellen. These are amazing names. Gabor and Miss Maragakis. So just a few things on this. Where's that pause thing I was looking at?
Yeah, I don't necessarily think the data is nearly as ambiguous as the public zeitgeist would make it out to be.
Have there been any COVID-19 vaccine safety concerns other than the issues concerning the Johnson & Johnson COVID-19 vaccine noted above? No serious safety concerns have been reported. Trials for the vaccine. Because what you'll see a lot out there, Doolittle, is there's a lot of things that people are releasing these stories and saying that, well, my otherwise healthy wife went and got a vaccine and now she's dead. And there'll be all kinds of information that's left out of that. It actually happened in my hometown of literally 1,500 people. Someone did die a couple of weeks after they had gotten their vaccine, but it turned out that there was no correlation between the two. But it created this hysteria and people freaked out about it. But and automatically on social media, people are like, she was a healthy person. I saw her walking dog and I saw her doing all this stuff. But her family eventually came out, and when an actual article was released, so that there was an opportunity for the people who knew her to have a say, we figured out, she had pre-existing health conditions and she was not healthy.
Okay, so why is it okay? So let me just why is it that it's appropriate to call it a COVID death if a person had pre-existing health conditions and then got COVID, but it's not appropriate to call it a vaccine death if the person had pre-existing health conditions and then got a vaccine and died?
Because there's no medical indication. Yeah, because there's no
COVID. Sorry, Travis.
So yeah, I was just saying there's no medical there's no evidence indicating that these vaccines cause death. There's a
lot of evidence showing that.
So how could there be if you start with the presupposition that the vaccines don't cause death?
Oh, it's not a presupposition.
Every time a vaccine,
you don't start with that presupposition though.
You just did.
No,
you just did that on me.
No, sorry.
Nobody died in trials.
Let me be more clear.
The toxin that causes death from the COVID virus is the spike protein, and that's what your immune system reacts to and causes you to go into a cytokine storm and and you die from an autoimmune reaction. In many of the cases, that's what causes all these people with the respiratory system symptoms. It's the spike protein. And what does the vaccine do? The vaccine reprograms your cells to manufacture the spike protein.
Yeah, but there's also no virus
proliferating. There's your mechanism. That's how.
That's an incredible leap in logic, considering that
it's not a leap.
After
no, well, hold on. Doctor is making a legitimate point right there, because autoimmune diseases are not something we don't know about. So what he's mentioning is you get that spike protein and the autoimmune system kicks in and has an overreaction. This is
that part was correct, but it's not. It doesn't really relate to the what I think the main point was when we were talking about the safety of these vaccines there, because the presupposition was mentioned. The testing process that these vaccines had to go through while they're being manufactured, that's part of the proof positive of it being why the CDC, World Health Organization, is willing to call these vaccines safe for human consumption. Because there's just no medical indication that there is something that can cause death in them.
Right.
Even though there have been some people who have gotten some allergic reactions and have had a tough time with the vaccine.
Yeah.
But they're not. It's not like COVID-19 that has been demonstrated with people with certain pre-existing health conditions. And look. Elderly people with pre-existing health conditions, 65 plus, being the main targets, and people who are.
So I do want to say, I'm just like extending an olive branch to you, doctor, because like he is right. So like people die from vaccines every year. There's a certain death rate from any vaccine. This is something we know, but it's I think the bigger issue, doctor, is do we save more lives than lives are lost through the negative repercussions of taking vaccines? And I think we do. And I think at that point, that's it's a no-brainer.
I think it's important to also reframe the question, not just in the manner of is it worth taking away. Like roadways kill a lot of people, but they're necessary for the way in which we live our society. They're kind of integral to our society. They enable us to do the things we do, and vaccines are in the same way, right? Getting vaccinated, and people die from it, but people die from almost everything in culture, and it's important to look at those statistical trends and see which way they lean, and when they are out of the norm, that is something we need to look at.
Right.
Also, I do have the study specifically cited by Brett and a couple other people about the issues that the vaccine, quote unquote, has. I can read an excerpt. I also posted the link to what I posted in COVID chat if you guys want to take a look at it. I could read from that if you want to, talking about the S1 antigen and the immune responses of them, how that spike protein works and where it is and isn't, and all of that good jazz.
Right. So anyway, if you're making a risk-based decision about which thing you're going to try to do as a society to let's just say end the pandemic.
Yeah.
Right. And you have, as I stated, presuppositional vaccine apologetics that say you can't say that that death was caused by the vaccine because the vaccine is safe.
No, that's not not
the way it works, though.
That wasn't the claim.
But they died with the vaccine. Just
that
like
doesn't make any
COVID
sense.
No.
But they also had pineapple juice, Doolittle. They also had pineapple juice and spaghetti.
The rate isn't enough.
But taking pineapple juice is a normal thing that people are going to do. People are going to normally drink pineapple juice.
Correlation doesn't mean causation.
Yeah, there's a causation correlation there, thing there. But I'm
perfect correlations.
Well, there's always a correlation when there's causation.
And you're presupposing a causation. in this case, right?
No, I'm presupposing a mechanism.
Which is presupposing a cause, the mechanism by which what happened.
No, there's a proposed mechanism, and the research that's come out recently that I posted and you laughed at because of your presuppositional apologetics says that the spike protein does get out of your shoulder.
I have that study. I literally reposted it. It's the one that disproves your argument, though.
How does that disprove my argument?
So to read it, I'll read both the part that everyone took issue with, and then I'll read literally, I think it's maybe half a page underneath that then does a good job of pretty much rectifying the concern. So to start it, these data points show that S1 antigen production after the initial vaccination can be detected by day 1 and is present beyond the site of injection, and that associated regional lymph nodes. So that's saying that, hey, the virus or the vaccine is spreading farther than we thought it would. That's one of the things that everyone was flipping out about, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, part of the FDA giving the conditional approval to do phase 3 trials in humans for the vaccine was the supposition that the vaccine does not leave your shoulder tissue.
So yes, but let me
clarify the preconditions that allow the preconditions. Yeah,
what you're doing right now is arguing a practicality versus the actual data. Because I'll read the rest of this article here, or this.
It's the basis of Travis thinking the vaccine is safe.
No. See, right now, if you watch the talk that you linked a little earlier, the Dr. Richard Malone on there is incredibly good at making the point I think you want to make.
And I have to,
because he's talking about informed consent. Oh, go ahead.
I have to clarify something. When I say Doolittle safe, I'm using the colloquial safe, like driving with me in a car is safe. It's safe enough for me to drive my niece and nephew around. If my niece and nephew said, "Uncle, is it safe to get in the car with you?" I would say yes. But motor vehicles are not very safe. They're much more dangerous than vaccines, right?
So here's a point that I think you need to consider. If the mechanism that the virus uses to create sickness in people is the spike protein, and we're vaccinating people with the spike protein, and let's just say you want everyone to get vaccinated, the people that are susceptible to dying from the spike protein are going to die from it, whether it's given to them by the virus or given to them by the vaccine.
No, that is a misunderstanding of the study.
Now, how many spike protein deaths have there been?
I'm not talking about it. According to that video from, so let's say everybody that died from COVID was a spike protein death. Is that fair to assume?
No.
Or are there other reasons why they died from COVID?
Yeah, COVID introduces a crazy immune response that isn't necessarily directly correlated with the spike protein. Although the spike protein, yes, is a major component and is one of the things that we're incredibly worried about. There is nuance that you can add here, so I don't necessarily agree with your premise.
Okay, but the spike protein is one of the things that we're necessarily worried about. Does that mean that you're allowed to or should not ignore the fact that that's what the vaccine is reprogramming yourselves to make for the rest of your life?
So again, that is a misrepresentation. It doesn't program your cells to make it for the rest of your life, as evidenced by the study that I'll finish reading if you'd like. On top of that, those spike proteins have not. Yeah, okay. So
please,
to start off again with the negative aspects, right? The little section that everyone's worried about. These data points show that the S1 antigen production after the initial vaccination can be detected by day 1 and is present beyond the site of infection and the associated regional lymph nodes. Induction of the LGL, GG, and IgA immune responses can be detected as early as 5 days post-vaccination and are associated with clearance of spike and S1 antigen in the systemic circulation. That sounds scary. But literally a couple bits below that, like I said before, the spike protein was detectable in 3 of 13 participants, an average of 15 days after the first injection. The mean spike peak level was, and it's literally 62 parts per milliliter, blah, 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 blah. After the second vaccine dose, no S1 or spike was detectable, and both antigens remained undetectable through day 56. For one individual, participant number 8 in the study, spike was detected at day 29, 1 day after the second injection, and was undetectable 2 days later. So this is not a, hey, forever you're going to be producing this toxin that's worried about. As of right now, the science says that it does not continue production, and it does not produce in the same levels that COVID infection does. So it does not lead to anywhere near the harm that actual COVID infection does. Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
Cool. So yeah, that's basically the point of contention. Now, like I said, I really like that conversation with Dr. Richard Malone specifically, because that guy is so far the only one that I've heard talk about a genuine problem of informed consent. And then that is an argument from government practicality as opposed to the efficacy and safety of the vaccine, because he has the vaccine as well. So does, I mean, the majority of the scientific community, because it's recognized that it is safe. But Dr. Malone is worried about, again, a couple other tangential things and practical institutionalized issues. He's not worried about the safety of the vaccine. That's not up for question in that way, because there are still studies currently going on to confirm whether or not it's safe. Like, I really loved the post you made with that chat, because it was super informative.
Can I say one thing? I see people talk about the exercise, they eat healthy, and this virus, they have nothing to worry about, and they die. So I was like, how would you know when you are to not worry about it, or when you are to worry about it?
What?
How are you to know if you don't have to
on,
worry about the virus, and like just you because doctor is saying, like, you, based on your understanding of yourself, you would know, I don't have to take the vaccine, I don't really have to worry about the virus. And like how would you know about yourself that you wouldn't have to worry about the virus?
Well,
worry
about it from
because
what perspective?
There's some people who died who didn't think they would die.
Yeah,
is what I'm saying.
Yeah, you're almost that.
So
can
how would
happen.
How would you know?
Ooh.
Well, there's some things that you just can't know. I mean,
well, yeah,
exactly.
Nivik, you're asking. This is kind of the motor vehicle question as well, right? You don't know that you're going to be safe when you get into your car.
Yeah, that's the thing. You don't take the chance then.
No, but the thing is,
no,
Nivik,
I don't mean the car. I don't
can't
mean the car. I mean with the virus.
Okay, but the point of all this is, and one of Doolittle's points is that you can't live all the time in being risk averse, or at least some people don't want to live that way. But I think when it comes to pandemics and you can potentially be a carrier, I think I people consider that when thinking about whether they're going to get vaccinated or not.
Yeah, that does go into that separation between the science and the practicality aspect. Oh, yeah, sorry, Chris, go ahead.
I think I might be having mic issues. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, we can hear you.
I was going to say, yeah, I mean, just agree, you could be a carrier. I mean, like, it's really odd hearing the people that are, saying, I mean, I'm, healthy, I'm young, whatever it might be. I don't need to get the vaccine. I mean, those should be the people that are getting the vaccine. I mean, there are people that cannot get the vaccine, that their doctors don't recommend. It's a small portion of the population, but there's kind of that communal responsibility, and you don't know. I mean, if your child, if someone that you love has a underlying autoimmune disorder of some sort,
right,
whatever it might be, that could have a terrible response. that has a ticking time bomb inside of them.
That's the other thing. People kind of operate under this assumption that they know everything that's going on in their body, but more times than not, people don't have a fucking clue what pre-existing health conditions they may have, because their life may have not gotten to a point where this has really reared its ugly head yet.
What about a person that isolates themselves?
What's that?
And you come across, what about a person that isolates themselves and you're like, I don't care, I'm very healthy and I'm strong, and you're carrying it and you kill them? Can you be, can you get charged for that? Or
in Italy, yes, actually.
Is it? Oh, okay.
Yeah, in Italy, they'll give you a manslaughter charge if you're outside during lockdown, because they consider it you're transferring the virus. But this was last year in the height of the pandemic. But again, this seems to be separating into that argument of practicality. Like, as a society, what should we do to keep everyone or individuals or whatever safe? But yeah, to tie it back, I don't think as of right now there is really much science to suggest that the vaccines are not safe.
Yeah, and like I said, they're when people are saying safe and they're using that colloquial understanding of what safe is, like going on a hike, hiking your favorite trail up the mountain is safe. Well, you can die. You could die doing it. There are things that can happen. Getting into a motor vehicle is a really good example of things that we generally call I'm not being unsafe, I'm just driving to the grocery store.
Travis, what I don't understand is, why would the person make an assumption that they don't have nothing to worry about when it comes to the virus, but think differently when it comes to the vaccine?
I don't think people should worry about anything, Nivik. People should not be operating on worry. They should be operating based on care. They should replace all the worry. Let me finish. They should replace all the worry in their head and in their life with care, and start caring about things and stop worrying about things. But
that's a philosophy I can get behind.
Yeah, and for future considerations of new policies and how you're going to approach pandemics in the future, because I think we've learned a lot through this, and approach that planning from a perspective of care. It might seem all fine and dandy, this idea I hear getting thrown around, err on the side of caution. Well, sometimes erring on the side of caution instead of erring on the side of, let's say, just reasonability, rationality, you might lose a couple 100,000 extra lives because you overreacted to a problem. Don't play fast and loose with how important it is to not overreact to things, because when you're doing things on such a large, when you're trying to get the whole world to chip in and try to harness or try to mitigate the spread of something before we get vaccines manufactured, you must consider the implications of your recommendations. And I think they should be based in reason, science, not based in erring on the side of caution. I think that's one of the most poisonous things that is that is an infection in some of these health organizations, and they're playing fast and loose, and they were off the beginning. But I think lessons have been learned, and I think some countries really got caught with their pants down as well, because they did not budget enough for having the required resources available in case there was, a pandemic. And I know it's tough, and some countries are poor enough as it is, but whether you have to ask for extra help to have a reserve of something, or to be able to keep your people safe if something does happen, from a management perspective, I think as a country, you need to take on that responsibility. But let's jump into the TAV. Thank you guys for everyone who engaged, and everyone who got to stop by on YouTube. I don't think you guys will see this until after this is uploaded, and I'll share it on the other networks as well. But as always, let art and science inspire.